Someone once told me that parenting was more about you as the parent than it is about your kids. And it took me a while to see that fatherhood is more than just filling space. It's a reflection of who we are at our core. We all want to be strong, stable, and a source of wisdom. But sometimes that means confronting the parts of ourselves that are anything but. What if being a father wasn't just about providing or protecting, but about the raw, difficult work of facing your own ashes and coming out stronger? Not just for your kids, but for yourself. My guest today is Kosta. He's walked through that painful descent and lived to tell about it. Kosta now teaches men to reclaim their power, heal from within, and live authentically. Today, we're going to explore the role of fathers and the deeper work that often goes ignored, that journey through the ashes and the uphill battle to find out who you are. Kosta, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Jeff. How you doing, brother?
Costa, tell me about the role that finding that descent plays for men in your coaching.
That place of darkness, it has been, I'll speak about my personal experience briefly. That place of darkness became my inspiration and it became the pivotal point of actually being able to heal from within and fall in love with myself again. And I see that again and again with the men that I'm working with. It's that state where we feel completely powerless, but at the same time, it becomes our biggest strength. And it's like the phoenix rising again from the ashes, and it almost has become a necessary process. But I wish we would be able sort of, to lift ourselves up from a place of empowerment instead of waiting for something bad to happen. But unfortunately, that's not the case. And it's like human nature that we have to endure this pain to actually realize what's the lesson behind it. Yeah.
I'm rereading Iron John right now, and it talks about that process of descending into the darkness, and it calls it katabasis, which is a Greek word.
Yes.
It describes it as a necessary plunge. I wrote this down because I really like this quote: a necessary plunge into pain and shadow and facing the hardest truths and parts about oneself long avoided. And it calls it an immensely powerful gravitational pull exerted by life itself. So that supports your idea that it's necessary. You don't have a choice. You're pulled into it.
It's that connection with the shadow. The more we try to push our shadow away, the more it comes back stronger and stronger. And I found with my own journey that I needed to embrace that part of me. I needed to understand it and I needed to love it. And that sort of gave me the freedom to seek the joy, to seek the inner peace. Otherwise, there was always something lurking, whether it will be the limiting beliefs, whether it was the lack of self-worth, and that will translate into sort of the toxic relationships, not being a good father, not being good with myself. And as soon as I identified these patterns and the awareness kicked in, it was like a light bulb moment that it's okay. It's okay. There's nothing to be fixed. It's everything's part of the journey.
That's a very difficult moment to come to, recognizing that you're okay even though you're going through that descent. So can you walk us through your own kind of descent?
My descent started like when I was a teenager, looking back at it, when something felt off. Like I didn't know where I belonged. I thought that was a purpose, like I needed to do something big. Just didn't connect with my mates. Just really, really weird. And obviously I didn't do anything as a teenager. Became depressed, then sort of started, with the addictions on and off, having fun, thinking that, like with all the material stuff, my life will be good. Then got married, became a father quite young. I was 20, 25 when we had our first daughter. And everything sort of started coming together. The fatherhood gave me purpose. And I felt like I was always meant to be a father, which was a beautiful thing. And please don't get me wrong. But at the same time, all these other things started surfacing up. I was able to provide the love. And at the same time, I was in healthcare. So I was always giving, always looking after people, being a father, being a husband. And then eventually things started running dry. I was realizing that I wasn't able to give, the same amount of love that I wanted to give. And there were a couple of deaths in the family that really shook me. So grief took over, basically. And I didn't know how to process grief. I didn't know how to connect anymore with my ex-wife, with my wife at the time. I didn't know how to be a father anymore. I thought it was just by providing, but without connecting emotionally. And I wasn't the man that I wanted to be. My rock bottom was I got a phone call from a friend at the time and said, I'm really worried about you. what's happening in your life, how you are. You look very depressed. You look really sad. Are you seeing anyone? Seeing a psychologist? Are you taking any tablets? And she turned around and she said, I will call you tomorrow. Make sure that you're okay. But the way she said it, it was like, I will call you tomorrow, making sure that you haven't done anything, really. So she was getting really worried that I was gonna do something, which I wasn't really gonna do because of my kids. So that was sort of um, something that kept me going. But the realization, oh my God, people are really concerned about me, about my well-being, whether I'm gonna be doing something. And then I looked at myself and realized, oh my God, I need to do something about it right here.
So this idea of living in the ashes or eating ashes, and that's the experience of sitting in the aftermath of destruction and learning to accept that loss and letting go of the illusions that you once had. So what was it that kept you there the most, the longest?
It's a really good question. The lack of self-worth and the guilt and shame associated with it. I felt that I failed my kids. I felt like I failed my ex-wife, failed my family, I failed my friends. The amount of nights that I sat here by myself and cried and trying, to empower myself somehow, but just didn't know how to actually get out of that. And I remember I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror. And I was so sad and scary at the same time, and I didn't know how to actually fall in love with myself again.
I've been to that place where I didn't love myself. What was it that started to get you out of that?
There were
And
little,
let me phrase that a little better. Was it this one moment, or was it a long, steady climb out? Like I know sometimes people have that epiphany versus putting one foot in front of the other and just doing the work.
I guess the epiphany was when I realized that I was suicidal and people were really concerned about me. So that was the start, but then it was like a very, very slow process. And the first thing that I started doing was trying to find the tools, trying to understand what were the things that I really needed, what were the things that were actually going to help me fall in love with myself again and not feeling guilt and shame anymore. Music helped me. Music really helped me. So I'm a percussionist. So joining bands and playing like I was playing so much. And then I found fishing. So I never fished in my life. And then suddenly, after going through my divorce, I became a fisherman. So that connection with nature, that really, really helped me. And spending a lot of time by myself, like with being connected with nature and fishing. Like I was doing that all by myself, like a week going on weeknights and, any excuse, just being out there. So that silence with nature and the excuse was just sort of, trying to catch a fish. Like it was so because I started going through everything that happened in my life. What was my responsibility and trying to get out of the victimhood. So that was a very, very big step for me. And I started falling in love with myself again the moment I realized that I wasn't a victim, that I made decisions based on what I knew at that time. And eventually I forgave myself that it was okay. And that's when everything started coming together again. But that process always it took very, very long time. And to make things even more complex for me is after my marriage, then I ended up getting a very toxic relationship for a lengthy period of time, which it wasn't based. There were feelings, but it wasn't a genuine relationship. Like I stayed with that person because I was feeling guilty in my marriage and I thought, like I need to try more. Like the problem is with me. I need to be a better partner. I need to be a better person. But the relationship wasn't healthy. So that obviously added more pain and stress. But it did help me. It did help me. It did help me to realize that there was nothing wrong with the outside. Everything that was happening was inside of me. And yeah, that's again another scary realization where you realizing you have so much work to do. And to this day, when I'm obviously in a much better place, there's so much work to be done, which is scary but exciting at the same time.
I don't think that work ever ends. That's sort of the point of life, isn't it?
Yeah.
To grow as much as you can. I found with my own descent, there's almost this clenching that happens. Like you tense up because you're like, I don't want to lose this. I need to hold on to things the best I can. And it's difficult to recognize that you need to let go. And that's, I think, the hardest part of it. You're almost surrendering control and allowing it to take you where it needs to take you because there's something you need to learn there. But that's such a scary process when you're in free fall as it is.
That letting go. It is very terrifying. Grief was one of my biggest teachers. The realization that death is real. It's not that's something that's gonna happen, when you're 80 years old. That was a big lesson for me of being able to let go.
I think I'm still learning to navigate grief. Can you talk a bit about why it's so challenging?
I was actually thinking about that yesterday. There is the part of us that we're scared of death for our own journey. That we haven't got enough time, to do all the things that we love. But there is the realization when we lose our loved one that we go through this extreme pain, that we're gonna experience the loss and the sadness by ourselves by losing the loved one. So it's not so much about, losing that person, they go wherever they go, but it's from a selfish almost point of view that the ego is saying, what about you? What's going to happen to you now? And that's again a very scary process. And unfortunately, within Western civilization, death is it's almost not that it's not respected, but it's almost like that's not going to happen. But it's the only thing that's definite in life. And as kids, and especially like in my culture, in Greek culture, it's always something that's never discussed. It's something so remote. And then when it really hits you, it really hits you. And it's like it's taking away everything that you know. The security, the love, the plans. Yeah, the plans. That's another thing that is not really mentioned with grief is, all the plans that you've made with that person, all the things that, define you as a person with your loved one. And then suddenly you are a different person. Suddenly you have to reinvent yourself. Suddenly you have to, put that energy, that love that you had for that person somewhere else. And that's not an easy thing.
Is processing grief different than other emotions?
I think so because I don't see grief as a negative emotion. Grief can create negative emotions, but itself it's not a negative emotion. It's love. That's all it is. Grief is love, and we have been conditioned, to express our love in a physical way, and then suddenly we're trying to reinvent that love in a different way, whether it's the love of also the loved one, and suddenly they're not there, and you're like, oh my God, what am I doing now? How am I supposed to redirect all this energy? So if you don't know how to handle that, obviously that will create pain, sadness, anger, hate, all these negative emotions. And then you have to deal with that.
Is you did a Himalayan trek as
Yes.
part of processing those emotions.
Yes.
What drove you to do that?
It was always on my bucket list. Like I always had a fascination with Tibet and the Himalayas and the mountain. It became really my bucket list when I was 30 kilos heavier, when I was smoking, and I decided, that's it. Started walking, I quit smoking, started looking after myself, and and I set my goal, like I wasn't even able to walk for 50 meters, and I set the goal, I'm gonna walk and go to Mount Everest base camp. That was my goal at the time. It took me 3 years to get there, but it became like my lighthouse. It was the light that was sort of driving me, like every day waking up and aiming to do 10,000 steps a day, and all the times that I had the cravings, have a cigarette or that extra beer at night. The Himalayas became my inspiration. So I managed to do that last year. I was actually able to let go some of my guilt and shame from that failed marriage, and I was able to let go some of the grief of my relationship, the grief of the passing of my brother-in-law, the grief of passing of my mother, of my father, my sense of belonging, migrating to Australia. So within that single moment, being up there, I felt like a different human being. It was very, very powerful, very, very powerful. And that's when everything became clear as well, what I needed to do with my future career, that I wanted to work with men.
Was it the ritual of walking those 10,000 steps or whatever that process became, or was it standing on the peak, on one of the peaks looking out? Was there like a moment where you're looking out and you were like, hell yeah, this is what I needed?
The peak is the icing on the cake. It's the confirmation of all your hard efforts. But nothing happens until you have habits, until you establish the habits. I wasn't going to be able to do it if I just decided to go and do it 3 years ago without training. But by doing the 10,000 steps every day, waking up half an hour early in the morning and working for half an hour and then doing it consistently, day in, day out, that's what changed things. And then obviously being able to get at the highest peak, just brought everything together and confirmed the reasons why I was doing what I was doing.
Those habits, was it more than just, I'm not minimizing it, but was it
Mm.
more than waking up in half an hour early and doing those steps? Was there something else you had in there? I know you're a
Yes.
spiritual guy. What
Yes.
else? What other habits did you put in there?
Meditation was changed my life, and that the noise, being able, to listen to the noise, what was happening, why I was feeling this way, why I was thinking this way, why I wanted to do everything, and the awareness that gave me about myself, about the world around me, about my purpose in life, everything became clear. So looking after my physical body was actually the easy part. That was the easiest part because all I needed to do was create that habit of walking every day, not drinking, not smoking, and I knew that my body will recover. I knew that I will get stronger and my stamina will improve. But with what was happening within, that was and still is the hardest thing. Trying to establish the habits, of doing the meditation practice as frequent as possible and quieten the mind and understanding that it's okay. It's okay. Whatever is happening inside of me, the thoughts, when I'm not feeling the best, when I'm reacting, the way that I don't want to react, that it's okay. And creating that self-love and then slowly creating the habit of letting go again, coming back to the letting go.
Can you explain the connection between meditation and self-love? Like draw that line for somebody who's never done it before.
Meditation, there's two components for me, the way I see it, is the stillness, the silence, and then there's that internal dialogue. So the stillness obviously is I was actually able to sit within myself, by myself, without any interruptions, without, the social media, without the noise, without the kids, without, thinking about the relationships, thinking about work, what I'm going to be doing, just by myself. And that's when everything started coming together. And that's when the internal dialogue started. That's when I realized, all the guilt and shame that was eating me alive. That's when I realized that I wasn't able to love myself. And that's when I realized, the patterns that as a teenager, the trauma that I had as a child, the trauma that I had within my marriage, within my toxic relationships, the addictions, all these internal conversations, the awareness that came out of it, that was my empowerment point because I knew what I needed to fix.
How has that shaped their upbringing and then who they are today?
I just start saying by saying that I am the best possible father that I am today. Like I am so happy at where I am at the moment. Obviously, that doesn't mean that there's no more work to be done, but I am exactly where I'm supposed to be, and that resonates in my relationship with my kids. Um, my kids, which are not kids anymore, they're 21 and 19, but we've got such a beautiful relationship. And like I see them as my friends and they see me as well as the friend, but I am also the protector and provider. And we have been able to go from a place where I didn't know where I belonged as a father to reconnect with them again and provide the safety that they needed. Going through the divorce, going through the lead up to the divorce, that relationship was just absent. Yeah, and we had a few conversations around that and how they perceived everything because they were quite young as well. Where in the early teenage years, they didn't know how to process everything. They felt like it was their fault, which I guess, that's what every child feels, when the parents go through a divorce, they don't know what to do, and they just want the parents to be together. And yeah, it was really, really, really hard, really hard. Now, these days, with the awareness and all the work that I've done with myself, I'm able to reestablish that relationship, and it's so good. It's so good.
What does safety mean in that context? I assume that doesn't mean like you're bouncing.
No, no.
What does that mean to you?
It's that authentic relationship, like being able to share everything really in a safe space, knowing that you're gonna be loved unconditionally. And yeah, I think that sums it up. That unconditional love.
What do you hope your daughters see in you now?
I'm getting a bit emotional just with the thought of it. I wanted to see that the man that I am today, also the man that I was back then, not to disregard that man. I just did what I did based on what I knew at the time, and I made the mistakes. And it's not about the mistakes. We all make mistakes. It's about how to be able to stand up again, love myself again, and I wanted them to see that, the love doesn't come, you're not supposed to be loving from the outside, but from the inside. And basically what that means is if you're able to love yourself, that love will pour to the outside world, to all our loved ones. It comes from the authentic place, from that abandoned place. That's what I want them to see.
That's beautiful. I see how that connection to meditation is there, like that meditation is that connection to that authenticity within yourself and then being able to express that. I think that's something really rare today.
And it's really hard as well because we have been conditioned that, there's not enough love, that there's not enough kindness, there's not enough money, there's not enough on anything really. But there is an abundance. There is an abundance of everything. As soon as you start looking within, everything makes sense.
What do you think fathers often or most misunderstand about their role in their kids' lives?
One thing that I see this recurrent pattern with my clients is that the role of the father is to provide non-stop. And when I'm saying provide, just the physical, material stuff. And, do the three jobs, provide the house, provide the financial security, and then, we get to a stage that we're waiting for the retirement and then suddenly we're gone. And that's not the purpose in life. And that's what we have been conditioned, by modern society to believe that that's the role of the man, of the father. And that's really hard to shake it off.
One thing I struggled with is knowing when I'm putting my own wounds onto my kids. How did you catch that?
That's a hard one because we tend to, sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally, to bring all our traumas and our wounds into the relationship, whether it's through even everyday little dialogues, or every time that our kids will see us, being sad, upset, disconnected, that has an effect on them. That has an effect on them. It took me a little while I was going through the process of my own healing. It took me a little while and I realized that my kids were really worried about me. And that gave me that extra strength to focus more on myself, not by hiding things from them, but empowering myself so I can actually be better, obviously for myself, but for them as well. Yeah, and it took obviously a few years, but I provided the reassurance while I was going through that process. I tried to provide that reassurance that it's okay. Like the times that dad was upset and crying, like, it's okay. I have to go through this. That I'm gonna be okay. Today I'm not okay, but tomorrow I'm gonna be okay. And they realize that, the man that they love, the father, is not this invisible God who's worked it all out. That this man makes mistakes. He's a human being, but he's able to understand the lessons from these mistakes and rise up again.
How do you reconcile that, especially when you're showing emotion in front of your kids?
So the easy solution is like, don't let your emotions affect you. If we could do that, that would be ideal, but that will never happen, obviously. Emotions is the language of our soul, of our subconscious, that will always be there. How do we handle these emotions? That's the trick. That's the challenging bit. What I realized is with the awareness again, the emotions became an opportunity to realize what's happening inside of me. Why am I getting triggered? Why am I getting angry, sad, happy? And that's the other thing as well. Like we focus on the negative emotions, but we need to focus on the positive as well. Like what makes us happy? What gives us joy and peace? As soon as the awareness kicks in, you come in from a place of empowerment.
How do you make the case for opening yourself to emotions? Like, as men, we're not trained to do that. We're not conditioned to do that. I think a lot of us are taught to ignore them, and then that just blows up in our face.
Yes, exactly. Yesterday I had a gathering with my brothers. So we're in the forest and we had a really deep session. And then at the end, we sort of got together, we hugged each other. And while we're sort of in the zone, I was just saying to them, we're redefining masculinity. We're redefining all the stuff that we were told what a man looks like and needs to act. And now, the way I see masculinity is strength in being able to express your emotions. That's the strong man. The man who acknowledges all the stuff that's happening inside, the fears, the anger. When we stuff up, we're able to acknowledge that and seek help. But that contradicts all the stuff that we've been told. And that's a hard thing.
I would argue that you can't, or it's 10 times more difficult to navigate that catabasis, that fall, if you aren't in contact with your emotions. Like they're giving you feedback as you enter it, or even as you're in it. So, I mean, that's one benefit to learning to connect to your emotions.
Exactly. And again, as men, like we have been told not to listen to these emotions. So it's data. It's really if like and you're an IT guy and you relate to that. That's all it is. It's data. So you have all this information to you and you ignore it. That's it. Like, you know that what you're doing is eventually it's going to catch up with you and something needs to be done sooner or later.
If you aren't in connection with your emotions, I find they end up driving you. Even if you repress them, even if you push them away, they'll come out at some point. If you're in connection with it, you can make them serve you. And I think of that high-powered businessman in the boardroom, and he's negotiating some deal, and he's going to be feeling fear or excitement or greed or something. And it's that ability to separate yourself from the emotions and have that. It's hard to put a time in it, but there's this half second of delay
Yes.
between when you feel the emotion, you sit in it, and then you respond, like the
Yes.
stimulus reaction. So that to me is power, to be able to sit in that time between feeling it and responding. And I wish more men would do that.
That's a very, very hard realization. And what I do with my men is like when that sort of realization kicks in and the awareness, I say to them, just stop for a second and just take a breath because that will give you that extra second of empowerment, of awareness. You take that breath and then you're like, okay, I'm going to respond this way. Because a lot of times we don't have that time. And it is a habit again. It is a habit of being able to control your emotions, being able to understand your emotions, and maybe you need that extra second.
How do you see the work you're doing now as like a continuation of the journey you were on?
It's what I was saying before in regards to self-love. So being able to love myself again, and now my cup is getting full, so it has to go somewhere. So it will go to my brothers. And the realization that I needed to work with men came probably a couple of years ago, and I always got along better with females. Maybe because I didn't know where I belong, maybe because I was a little bit more, weird in a sense, as a teenager. But I found this calling, that I need to give back to my brothers. I need to share my experience and my wisdom with my brothers and help them in any way, shape or form I can. And it's natural now. Like it feels like it's just what I'm supposed to be doing. So it doesn't even feel like work or anything like that. It's just so easy, so easy. And I think that resonates with my brothers as well.
If you could speak to those men who are sitting up, maybe they're in that low point, they're falling down that cliff. How do you speak to them to make the case to go on a healing journey? Although maybe you have a different word of it for it.
Maybe reclaiming the life. That's a little bit fluffy as well, but yeah, and I guess everyone has their own language. Maybe feeling happy, joy, and peace. What I will say to this man is like, how will you envision yourself in a month's time, a year's time, in 5 years, in 20 years? The version that you see yourself today is the version that you want to be. And if there's something that doesn't resonate with you, if you do want to change, then maybe just start with that and write it down. What's that one thing that you want to change? And then break it down to how you're going to change this. Is it something, that you can start today that will actually improve your life even by 1%? And take a step back. Maybe on Sunday, instead of sitting and watching the football, maybe you take your kids out for a walk at the park.
What's one thing that you're grateful for having gone through this journey?
The grief. Where do I start? The grief of the loss of belonging and migrating here to Australia and missing, my life in Greece. The grief of my marriage, the grief of my relationship with my kids, going through the divorce, the grief of my toxic relationships and what a person that I became, the grief of losing my parents, my brother-in-law, all this stuff, my professional career as a nurse, and like so many things that grief, all the pain that I experienced with grief, but I won't be that person if it wasn't for grief. Now, what I'm trying to do in the lesson that came out of this is being able to experience, all this stuff without the pain, hopefully, like coming from a different place.
Kosta, thank you for your time. If
Thank you.
somebody is interested in working with you, how do they find you?